and then
I think one of the impressive things that's come out this week is the agreement between Andy and the Home Secretary that all of these abuses need to be looked into. And Theresa May made a commitment to Andy Burnham across the floor of the House of Commons that not just Orgreave, but the other scandals that have afflicted the South Yorkshire police force, including Rotherham, for example, the child abuse, these all need to be looked at very seriously. Okay. And I think for a Home Secretary to be unflinching in being willing to confront these shocking questions that have been unresolved, I think is a step forward for the way that we run our country.
And you wanted to say a brief word on that?
I do, and agreeing with everybody on the panel. Why have we now got this verdict, 96 unlawful deaths? It's because of what the lady said. There was just a complete disregard for football supporters' safety in that period. Let's remember, this was 4 years after the Bradford fire. 4 years after the Bradford fire, and yet we had those pens and those fences. I was an Everton supporter at Hillsborough the year before, and it was the worst afternoon I'd ever had at a football match in those central pens. I just looked at my brother's head all the games. I didn't want to lose him in the crowd because I knew how bad it was, and that's the era that we were in. And it is class, just to finish, an us and them, wasn't it? And I would say it does need to go wider now. It is about power. The lady mentioned Bernard Ingham. Yeah, he called the Liverpool supporters a tanked-up mob straight after as part of the cover-up. There is a elite in politics, in the police, in the legal system, in the media too, that colludes together to exercise power over ordinary people. That's the story of Hillsborough. But you do have to have the story of Orgreave, as the gentleman said as well, if you're going to know the full truth about Hillsborough. If we're never going to let this happen again, you have to fundamentally rebalance the system in the way Alex Salmond is saying, and give ordinary people the ability to get truth and justice when they need it.
OK. We must... thank you very much. Thank you very much.
If we stay in the EU, how can immigration be controlled to ensure that jobs and services are not stretched to collapse?
So, Paul Marshall.
It can't. It can't. The EU has a unique approach to movement of peoples. Every other free trade zone in the world does not have any requirement about free movement of people. And the EU has an ideological commitment to free movement of people, which means that we get, at the moment, about 250 to 300,000 immigrants a year from the EU, which we can't do anything about, and that means that Theresa May is having to restrict other types of immigrants from other places that we actually need. I know that in Hull, the immigrant population has tripled in the last, I think, 10, 15 years, and mostly from the EU. Now, that existing situation is now being compounded on a massive scale by a second mistake by Merkel, which is to invite a huge number of migrants from the Middle East and Africa, which has created a very large historic wave of immigration. If you think about the population forecast for the world in the next 20, 30 years is to go from 7 billion to 10 billion. Most of those extra people are going to be in Africa. They're all going to have mobile phones, and they're all going to be hearing about how great it is in the EU. So we've got a historic change in the whole debate about migration, and as you say, that is already putting very big pressure on housing, on health, on our schools, and staying within the EU, as it's with the current set of policies, you can't do anything about it.
So you're voting Brexit, I take it?
You got it.
No woman there. And then I'll come to you, Alex Salmond. Yes, the lady there.
I can't believe what I've just heard, in all honesty. Everybody in Africa will have a mobile phone and will be able to tell each other how amazing it is in Europe. What a ridiculous statement.
No,
do you understand that actually people in a lot of places coming over through Europe coming to our country are doing it because they are desperate. They are not doing it because they are having a little chat on Facebook about how amazing this country is. It is a ridiculous thing to say.
Well, actually, so some are doing it because they're desperate. A large number of the migrants into Europe are actually the wealthier group of migrants, whether that be from Syria or from Africa, because they do have, a lot of them do have the access to a mobile phone.
Syria is a war zone.
Yes.
So, you are telling me that the majority of people coming from Syria are doing so because they are wealthy? The majority of people coming from Syria are in fear of their life?
The people coming... The majority coming from Syria to Europe are the ones who can afford to pay the fees to get in. The ones who are poor...
And what
just
about
a minute,
the 3,000 children that are coming alone from Syria? Are they wealthy?
The ones who are poor are the 2 million refugees sitting in Lebanon, the 1.5 million sitting in Jordan, and the 2 million on the Turkish border. They can't afford to come to Europe.
All right, let's go back to Linda's question, which was how can, if we stay in the EU, how can immigration be controlled? She says to ensure jobs and services aren't stretched to collapse. Alex Hammond.
Well, it can't in an absolute sense, of course, and that's right. But you know, this debate between the lady and Paul is the very nux of the argument here. You know, are the people who've been responding to this huge migrancy crisis, are they people who are being pulled in by information about the wonderful life they could have in Europe, or are they people who are being pushed out by civil war and desperation? I agree with the lady. They are people who are being pushed out and are fleeing for their lives, and that is why so many of them have died in the flames. In a week, Paul, where the House of Commons, to its shame, had refused what the House of Lords suggested, to take in 3,000 unaccompanied children in an atmosphere where 10,000 children have already gone missing in terms of we don't know where they are, who are clearly in danger. And the sort of, and I'm sorry about this, but the sort of logic and argument you've put forward is the excuse for why so many of these members of Parliament went through the lobbies and denied the right of even 3,000 children to come to this country for safety and for security.
But Alex, Linda's question is about long-term immigration, and as you know, the official figures, well, official figures, estimate 3 million more EU migrants. And up to 2030. I think that's the question you were asking, isn't it? Yes, she's nodding. That is the question. Not the specific interest of refugees from Syria.
Yeah, but with respect, David, Paul took us very much onto that subject.
Yes, no, but can you go back to the other one?
I would argue a different position in terms of people. We were talking earlier on about the Jewish community, and I mentioned I was on the Holocaust Memorial Trust. One of the things that trust and that foundation is doing is not just having a memorial so that people remember the Holocaust. It's celebrating the achievements of the people who came to this country fleeing the terror of Nazi Germany and the achievements of their descendants. See, I take the position, I come from a country which has not suffered from immigration, but has suffered over the last century and a half from emigration. And all these Scots who've emigrated have made profound differences to the countries they've gone to, have achieved great things. So I don't like or accept the argument that immigration is a bad thing. I think immigration is a good thing, and I think strong societies have the ability to take the talents and abilities of people and make our country better.
Alex,
so I don't
Alex,
accept the premise of the question.
You're talking about a very different question. Do you think that all of the 3 million people who will come from Europe into this country over the next 10 years are people bringing talents that we can't supply in this country? Do you think they're people aren't they people who will come because obviously if we have a living wage here that is more than double what they can earn at home in Romania and Bulgaria, of course they will come here if they get the chance.
So they're not coming for the benefits then? Because that was the previous argument. They were all coming for the benefits.
I don't think they are. No, I think they're coming.
Right.
And I don't understand a government that, on the one hand, is introducing a living wage that will beat all those wages,
I don't understand
and on the other saying, and on the other hand saying that a tiny adjustment to entitlement for benefits, which may or may not be agreed by the ECJ,
Hold on,
will be
give her a
enough to
chance
stop
to-
them coming.
Alec, give her a
Will
chance
be
to
enough
answer.
to stop them coming, because it won't.
Go to the
And
question
the
again.
government can't sustain that line.
Are they answering the question you asked?
No.
Go on, then.
My question is that I have got no problem with the lady here about a political or any other asylum. That's our kind of heritage, and we should continue doing that. But I have worked in industry as HR and training, where I have worked with a production line that has been predominantly Eastern European, to the extent that one of our employees, who was British, went off with depression because nobody spoke to him in his own language for a 10-hour shift. And that guy was totally and utterly isolated. These people are great. They work hard. You can't say they're coming for benefits, because they're not. They're coming because they want to work. The trouble is that we don't have an infinite amount of jobs. We don't have an infinite amount of NHS or housing. We're a small country. You know, there has to be...
Greg Clark. You've had a wrong way.
We're sitting here in the city of Hull, which is one of the cities of the nation that has always been connected with the world. Its prosperity, magnificent buildings like that, were based on being open to the world and trading with the world. And we have very recently in this city a major investment. Everyone in this audience knows that Siemens are investing £1 billion in this city. That will involve some people from Germany coming to work here, just as people from Hull will go and work in Germany. That has been part of the way through generations that we have succeeded as a trading city. And I think, as Siemens have said, it would be a big mistake for the United Kingdom, as well as for them as a firm, if we turned our back on that tradition.
Greg, they're arriving in the full knowledge that we're about to have a referendum. They've come here, they're investing in the full knowledge there is a risk of this country deciding to leave Europe. Siemens is not going away. Siemens has come knowing that that is a possibility.
This
is nonsense. This is nonsense to suggest that these things won't happen if we leave the EU.
The figure given of 3 million new immigrants by 2030, are you happy with that?
Well, that was a figure that the Office for National Statistics have published before. And so what the government did, rather than to use a different figure that they'd estimated for the purpose, they said, right, we want to reduce immigration, but we will use the figure that is out there. And so that is what it's based on.
And you're happy with that figure? That would be all right. I mean, you answer the lady's question about schools and pressure on the National Health Service and all this.
Theresa May has been very clear that we do want to bring down the levels of immigration. But in terms of putting that model out, I think responsibly, we have
because
used we've used the figures that the Office of National
But
Statistics
she says it's harder
to
she herself has said it's harder to control immigration, being in the EU.
Theresa has been very candid.
She's very honestly, actually, Theresa May made it clear that with the EU policy, she cannot control immigration, and she can't control who comes in. The living wage is 6 times what it is in Romania and Bulgaria. Of course, it's very attractive to them. So what happens is that our immigration quota gets filled up with low-skilled workers, and we're not able to bring in the nurses, the teachers, the IT programmers that actually the economy needs.
OK. The man there, in the you, sir, in the pale blue shirt, yes.
3 million people coming in from basically Eastern Europe in the next 10 years is the equivalent of building 10 cities the size of Nottingham. How can the country cope with doing that? It's just impossible.
Andy Burnham, can you answer? Andy Burnham, would you like to answer his point?
Well, yeah, I will, but I'll go direct to the lady's question, because I think you need an answer to that question. I'll try and do that rare thing of, if I can, try and answer, because I'm very pro-in. I think it's in the country's interest to stay in Europe. However, I do recognise your and the general concern about immigration. I hear many of the things you've said in my own constituency. So my answer, you wanted something practical, didn't you? My answer would be, look at protecting skilled wages. Because why are production lines like the way you describe? It's because companies go around, go to agencies abroad and bring in huge numbers of... It creates a draw for them to bring people in. If there were European rules that protected the wages of the skilled workforce, there wouldn't be that incentive for them to go around and bring people in to undercut the skilled wage level. And that's my vision of Europe, a social Europe, a people's Europe that works for everybody.
But
the one thing I just would say,
will help
just to
that.
put it in context, we all have to remember in this debate some of the points Alex rightly made. Number one, immigration is not a one-way street as it's sometimes presented. There are thousands, millions of British people around Europe, either spending time in Spain or working abroad, as my dad did before. And also, they are net contributors.
Totally dishonest.
People coming in overall are net contributors. They tend to be younger, they tend not to have dependents, they add to the British economy. And as you rightly said, the refugee situation is entirely within our control because we're outside Schengen. And if we were to leave the European Union and wanted the trade benefits, we'd have to accept free movement.